I guess we are recording.
It says you are.
Excellent. So I guess since we're starting this interview, I guess to give some time to introduce yourself and to tell us a little bit about who you are.
Okay. Well, my profession is artist and writer, and there were various things that put me on that path. And I think seeing the original Star Blazers series when it first aired was one of the most important things. When I watched that, I knew that I wanted to have some kind of a career in either comics or animation. And watching that show helped me understand the potential for a dramatic presentation using techniques of both. And so I decided that that's the kind of thing I wanted to do with my skills and my career. And I've ended up doing both. And I'm still doing both today.
That's awesome. I saw a little bit of your biography, some of the things you've done. I saw you did a Project A comic, a couple of those, and some Star Blazer stuff, and things like that. I saw your documentary as well,
Mm-hmm.
about the history of Yamato. And it was definitely great. There's a lot of really cool archival photos in there and things like that. And I guess one of my questions is that this isn't not at this point. It's also just going to be some questions that I'm asking for partly myself and partly for my class. I only have two questions for my class. One of them having to do with Star Blazers, and I guess you answered part of it, which was what are some of your experiences with Star Blazers. Do you want to actually elaborate on that a little more? Maybe even tell a story when you first saw it, or
Sure. Back in '77, of course, the original Star Wars movie came out, and that thing ate me alive. My life was all about Star Wars from that point on. Uh, and the next thing that came along in that vein happened to be Star Blazers. It started on American TV in the fall of '79. And I tuned into it maybe about 3 months in. It was somewhere during the second half of the Comet Empire series, which is like the best part of the story, in my opinion. And I just could not believe what I was seeing. It was better, somehow better than Star Wars, which I could not have imagined at the time. And when the show looped around again, I could tell we were going back to the original because the animation was a little rougher. And so it was obvious that this thing had more of a history than I initially thought. And so I watched it every day. It was on TV at 4:30 in the afternoon. And I could just feel my brain expanding with every episode because it had everything I loved about Star Wars and a lot more too. It had a much bigger story, and it also had continuity, which was something I had just never seen in cartoons before. The standard cartoons of the day were all episodic, and you could watch the episodes in any order. But this was obviously a big, long-running story that had a long arc to it. And I just never conceived that you could do anything like that in animation. And so it inspired me to want to do that with my life. And so between Star Wars and that, my path was laid out for me. And I've been on that path ever since. And I've found numerous ways to repay that debt. The Cosmo DNA website is the biggest one. And I continue to use that inspiration in all the projects that I do now.
that's really cool. I definitely use that site to help myself out a lot. My story with Yamato, it started rather recently. It was a couple years ago. A friend of mine, who's sort of my anime mentor, they showed me. They brought over a couple vinyls they got, and one of them was Teresa Forever. And so
Mm.
we listened to that, and I was like, wow, that's a really gorgeous song. And well, what's this space battleship Yamato thing? And I did some digging and eventually started watching the original series. And at the time, I didn't really know. I wanted to be a film studies major, and then they sat me down and they said, Jules, we kind of gutted that program. So you either become a film major or an English major. And I chose film, but I just didn't know really where I was going. I was going through a really rough point, and I just went on a whim and started watching the original Yamato, and I just fell absolutely in love with it. And I was a dishwasher at a local place for a little bit, and that's all I talk about just every day was. I didn't even care if nobody knew what it was. I was just like, oh yeah, I'm just I'm watching the show where bunch of people go to a planet called Iskandar to get the Cosmo cleaner to sort of wipe Earth away of its radiation. I didn't find out about Star Blazers till just a little bit after I started watching Yamato.
Oh, so you went the other way. You started with the Japanese version and went to English.
I did, and
I had the. In fact, everybody in my generation who followed it had the experience starting with the American version, and then finding the Japanese version, which was so much deeper and broader.
Yeah, it's definitely very, very different to say the least. And
it's an excellent way to find the depths of the anime world, because we had that grounding. Even if we didn't know a single word of Japanese, we knew the characters and we knew the story. Mm-hmm. And then when we started getting a hold of the films that followed it, we were just inspired to learn as much as we could of the language to better understand the story. And then naturally that introduced us to the entire world of anime.
Yeah, it's really cool to hear that was a lot of people's gateway anime, because in a way, like, mine was the original Dragon Ball. Actually, I have a little Goku tattoo. I'm a huge fan of the original Dragon Ball, and I discovered it in a little more unconventional way, which was the original manga and went on. But anyway, this is about Yamato, not about Dragon Ball. Yeah, I've definitely heard the stories of people discovering it through Star Blazers. I've talked to a few other fans about it. It's really weird to say, like, oh yeah, I discovered it through Yamato and not Star Blazers. But I definitely used to, when I was younger, buy anime, mostly ones that weren't released here yet. Like, I know Yu-Gi-Oh! In Japanese was incredibly hard to find for a very long time, and other things like that. But I never had that experience of sort of trying to discover. Since I was more into an internet age, so it was more, everything's been a lot easier to find. But surprisingly, when it came to Yamato stuff, it was kind of harder to find for a little while. I mean, you can't get the series in Japanese legally here, but besides the movies, of course. Mm-hmm. I've got them all on Laserdisc, but
wow, there's a throwback.
Yeah, I'm actually a Laserdisc collector. I have, right behind me is my Laserdisc shelf. I've got a lot of stuff here. One moment, I guess. Since I am going to segue into Yamato merchandise, since that's part of my presentation, I'll be right back. Here are just a couple I have. Because my friend got the complete Yamato box, they sold me the entire original series. The glare doesn't really help. And a few months ago, I ordered new old stock of the final Yamato disc, which I know you commented on it when I got it. So yeah, this is honestly my favorite way to watch the movie too, because it looks amazing and the sound's even better.
Yeah.
But and that's gonna be part of the restoration. He's really getting this one down since it has the original aspect ratio. But anyway, I guess speaking of Yamato merchandise, so part of my episode that I'm doing was, one of them I was talking about Star Blazers and its impact, and the other one I was talking about is Yamato merchandise. Of course, I mentioned the Yamato bicycle because that thing's amazing. Mm-hmm. But are there
it's unfortunately very, very small.
Really?
Yeah. You don't get a sense of that unless you see one in person, but they are tiny. The seat comes about level with my knee.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so they were not intended for big kids.
I guess not. I mean, and I know there was some promotion with Be Forever Yamato with it, since it had some of those little flags and things like that. So
Yeah,
it obviously came a little bit
accessories.
later.
They weren't necessarily meant for that bike, but it's fun to put them all together.
Mm, understandable. But I guess I want to say, what are some of your experiences with, I guess, Yamato merchandise, and either some of the weirder ones you found, or just, I guess, let's have a conversation about Yamato merch.
Yeah, well, my favorite era in terms of Yamato merchandise is the very beginning because it represents sort of crossroads in anime history. The thing that's most important about the franchise is that the first series was meant for a teenage audience, but the marketing still followed an older model, which said that said that anime was only for Japanese children. And at the time, it was expected that when you turned, say, 9 or 10 years old, you would graduate out of it and not watch it anymore. And there were occasional cartoons that tried to break that mold. One of the first was Lupin the Third, the very first series from '71. And it met with moderate success. It could only go so far because it just it wasn't considered acceptable for adults to watch cartoons. And so all the marketing that went along with anime at the time was aimed at little kids. And so you couldn't make products that would sell to older viewers because it was just assumed that they didn't exist. So as a result of that, even though the first Yamato series is obviously very mature in terms of story content, all of the merchandising from series 1 that came out in '74 and '75 is still geared toward little kids. And so you get a sense of what the standards were at the time just by looking at what they did. Like stationary goods, for example, or like kids' apparel, or just the kind of artwork that was created for them with no real quality control from the production side.
Very simplistic looking, a lot of
Yeah,
them. A lot of the colors like really off, and they look really weird. Almost bootleggy, but I wouldn't say that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can see a whole gallery of them on the website. But that's my favorite stuff because of what it represents in terms of the time capsule of history. And that only changed when the first movie came out in 1977, because then teenagers actually went to movie theaters. And so the merchandising companies could see them and see, oh, these are not little kids. So we can start to make merchandise geared toward teens, like T-shirts that fit teen bodies, for example. That was a big one. And giving away animation cells at movie theaters was something that started with Yamato. They were just looking for some way to lure, not knowing that they were going to come anyway. But they thought maybe if we tell them you can get a free cell if you line up in the theater at the theater early, maybe we'll get a few people to show up. And boy, did they ever! That became a giant collector's item.
Oh yes.
On the music side, the original record that came out was a 45 single, which apparently you have because you're reaching for it.
Yes, I do.
Uh-huh. But until '77, that was literally all you could get. That and a storybook version. And the teenage fans just were gobsmacked by the music, and they wanted the music, but all they kept getting were these storybook records until December of '77, when it was decided, well, we can finally put some real money behind music merchandising. And then they did the Symphonic Suite album, and that changed everything. Suddenly, anime was not just being viewed by teenagers. The music from it was respected by adults, and that broke down a gigantic barrier. That one album, I think, is the turning point for the entire anime music industry. So it's things like that that happen as milestones along the way that make it such an interesting topic to explore. Another one that you can look at, another category of merchandise you can look at is home video. In the beginning, they came out with the VHS of Final Yamato, the 35 millimeter version. Mm-hmm. And then in the wake of that, they started putting out the other films on VHS and Laserdisc, and also VHD and Beta, both of which are dead formats now.
Yeah, I've handled a couple of VHDs. I just got my friend a VHD player. Part of it he had part of the package came with the first disc of Odin.
Interesting.
Really good quality, surprisingly. VHD is really good audio, we came to find out. Picture quality is okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're dealing with a needle on a platter.
It's better than CED, though.
Yep, sure is. Yeah. One of the most interesting video releases was kind of a hybrid. Let me go and grab it so you can see exactly why.
Alrighty.
So interesting. Can you still hear me?
Oh, yes, I can. You're coming in clear through the airwaves.
Okay. The one movie that was the most popular, of course, was Farewell to Yamato.
Ah, good old Sadaba.
Also known as Arrivederci.
Arrivederci, Space Cruiser Yamato.
When it came time to graduate from Laserdisc and VHS to DVD, this was the very first Yamato DVD that you could get.
Oh, yeah, the Laserdisc looking one.
Yeah, you notice it's in a Laserdisc-sized box. And when you open it up, there's the DVD in a CD case.
Yeah, I have, I know America did it a little bit, too. I have the first Ranma movie on DVD. Mm-hmm. And the early pressings of those came in, like, a CD jewel case.
Right. So this, I think, is another interesting crossroads, like a turning point when they were moving out of one format and into another. For some reason, they felt that maybe the DVD was too small to sell itself. And so they put this deluxe packaging around it. So you could put it on a shelf with your Laserdiscs, but you would have this other kind of product inside.
It's very pretty. I mean, along with your other two or three, I think there's three other Farewell releases, because there's there's the standard one, there's the one in the 90s, and then there's the one in the box, the movie box set.
Yeah, it came out on laser in there were waves of Laserdiscs like every 5 years or so. So there were 3 or 4 different ones before this came along. And concurrent with those, they were releasing the TV series too. So everything got onto every format.
Mm-hmm.
And that continues now, although some of them haven't gotten to Blu-ray yet. Only the first series and the films. And I think the reason for that is series 2 and 3 were both shot on 16 millimeter film. And so they can't upgrade or up-res to Blu-ray quality. So there's probably not much incentive to try and remaster them.
I'm surprised they don't. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Nope, I'm done.
I was surprised they don't do because Discotech, what they like to do is they'll do standard definition Blu-rays.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they won't really. They'll do pretty much like a kind of an upscale and then throw them out there instead of being like, oh, we're just going to restore this whole thing. And I know there's definitely a quality difference, because I know in the first Yamato film on the Blu-ray, the deleted scenes are on 16 millimeters, so the quality just kind of jumps all over the place. Right. But yeah, I think I want to go back to talking about cells. Do you actually own any Yamato cells?
Yes, I have 2 or 3.
That's really cool. I don't own any personally yet, mostly because they're incredibly expensive. just to say the least. The last sell I got was from Fightixer 1, which was surprisingly cheap. But I digress. I guess what is the rarest piece of Yamato merchandise that you own or have seen, I guess?
The single rarest item would have to be, I mean, other than the cells, which are, of course, one of a kind, is a small dojinshi that contains a complete reprint of a manga of Series 1 by an artist named Yuki Hijiri. It was published in one of the, well, there were several magazines that covered the first series at the time, and there were 3 different manga, and he did one of those 3, and that's the only one that never got a reprint. So a fan group came along and said, we should collect this, and so they made this little paperback-sized doujinshi that collected all the chapters into one package, and they only printed 300 of them.
Wow.
Yeah. So I managed to get one in an online auction. Oh, but there's something even rarer than that. And that would be a pitch for a TV series called New Space Battleship Yamato that was created in, I think, 2005. And there was only one of those. I managed to get that in an online auction as well. I got some help from friends who threw some money in.
Holy crap.
Yeah, and we won. We won it. And it consists of a pack of text material and another pack of design materials. And when I got it a few years ago, I translated the whole thing, and it's online at Cosmo DNA.
That's really cool. I gotta have to read it then. I didn't know about that.
Yep.
I haven't explored all of Cosmo DNA. I used to just, I guess, I mean, even a few couple months in class, when I'm bored, I'll just go on to Cosmo DNA and just see, like, oh, what's the weird Yamato thing I haven't read about yet? Because when my anime watching, I'm trying to kind of watch sort of history unfold in order. So I did this. I watched all the way up to Final. Yes, I even trudged my way through Yamato 3. And what my friend decided not to tell me was that pretty much none of Yamato 3 mattered until, besides the Galman-Gamalus alliance, because none of it factors into Final. So, but they tricked me into thinking all of it factored into it. And everybody, like, well, I don't want to spoil Yamato 3, but when I got to the end and realized that not all of it mattered, and I was riffing on it MST3K style throughout the whole thing, it was a trip. But
yeah, just sort of one other thing I could show you from my bookshelf. And this goes back to what I was saying about the first series and the merchandising that went with it. Okay. Again, the vast majority of it was aimed at little kids. So here is a book that is printed on heavy cardstock.
Oh, I just got one of those kind of things recently.
Yeah.
Here, one moment. At Youmacon, I got a Heavy Metal Elgaim book of that.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
so,
I love these.
As you can see, the artwork on this is very different from what's in the show.
Oh, yeah.
This was made just using some of the pre-production art that they put out in their their press kit. And so what you see in the book is just a rough approximation of what's in the anime.
Oh, that's an early Okita design too.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. But what you can imagine is if you're a teenager and this is the best you can get, you're going to be very disappointed. Because you're not seeing anything from the show. You're seeing an interpretation of it. And not a very good one.
I was going to say, everything looks so exciting and happy.
Yeah. So Fortunately for them, there was one exception. There was one single book you could get that actually was authentic, and that was this one right here. I think it's called Big Illustration Book.
Yamato no tsubete ga wakaru. Something about understanding Yamato.
Right. This is an actual guide to the show, and it was created by Studio Nui, which was the design house for the mecha.
Oh wow, that's yeah. Well, there's Harlock.
Yeah. And whereas some of this art is not from the show, it's at least from the people who worked on the show.
That design there reminds me of the pilot film.
Mm-hmm. And it had actual stills from the show.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. So this was the first place you could get real images on paper, as opposed to, fleeting TV images that you could maybe get with a still camera.
Mm-hmm.
But that was still difficult. Oh, and here's something that's unique to this book that never appeared anywhere else, this giant cutaway.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of books have, interiors of the Yamato, but they're usually like side views. They don't have it from that kind of angle.
Right. And then there's a super weird page which has all these aliens that never appeared in the show. And this came out while the show was on the air, maybe halfway through.
Oh, that's great.
But again, all this artwork was done by the design studio working on the show itself. So it had some authenticity that other book didn't. And so it kind of presented this this little oasis for the older fans.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. And this is another project, a product that's very, very rare because they didn't make a lot of them. Here's the back cover. And everybody who bought one guarded it jealously.
I don't blame them. It's especially with all that art in there. It's quite incredible. It's not like a Be Forever Yamato program, which you can find literally everywhere. That is the most common piece of Yamato merch I found outside of like the new stuff.
Yeah, from 77 on, there was no shortage of anything.
Mm-mm.
Except the occasional books that that didn't get a wide release for whatever reason. But anybody who wanted a book could definitely go and get one somewhere.
Wow.
And records too, of course. The records were probably the most popular category of merchandising back then.
Oh yeah, I see the records everywhere. There's this booth I go to called Otaku Joe's, and he has a bunch of 45s, like just a whole box of them, and like 98% of them are just Yamato duplicates. Like there's that Starsha one. But the one that I realize is really hard to find that my friend ended up getting for me, which is my favorite track from Yamato, is Ore to Yamato from Final, which is my favorite Sasaki track. I wanted that for like ever, and I've only seen one copy of it around. Like I know it's common, you can find it, but like it's hard to find. It's hard to find vintage stuff at conventions nowadays. So I mean, I was even shocked to find an El Gaim book because I will defend this show. I know it's awful, but I will buy merchandise for it.
Yeah, even when I go to stores in Japan, I still find Yamato records all over the place.
That's so cool, and I'm not surprised given its intense popularity, especially there. It's quite cool. Honestly, at this point, I pretty much got everything I needed for my video. Like we can keep talking about Yamato stuff just outside of that if you'd like.
Well, if your focus is going to be merchandising, I gave you what I feel is the most important point about it at the beginning. The fact that it represents an evolution out of one business model into another one that was much broader and much healthier. And we pretty much have that to thank for the world of anime that we know now. That's created the model for everybody else to follow. And it was really due to the fans keeping the show alive through reruns and making their own merchandising in the form of doujinshis and proving that they were there and they were a force to be reckoned with. So the fans played a vital role in making this happen, and in such a way that I don't think is even possible now.
I agree. Especially, with the advent of the internet and the fact that there are there's so many larger fan communities these days, and everybody's connected. It's no longer word of mouth. It's pretty much whatever's trending.
Yep. However, the downside of that, even though information is much easier to come by, is that I think the attention span for most anime is pretty short compared to what it used to be. One reason for that is because there's so much out there to follow. As soon as you absorb one thing, there's 10 more very similar things that you can dive into. And so longevity isn't really part of the model anymore. Very few franchises are making stuff that's meant to last.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
So that's why a lot of the merchandising today is very fleeting. And you see a lot of carbon copies. A show comes along, you're going to see a certain kind of character good product, and on the next show, you're going to see that exact same product with different characters on it.
It's a good archetype that everyone can follow.
Yeah. So it's become kind of cookie cutter and standardized. I assume that you are keeping up with the newest Yamato stuff.
A bit. A lot of my bias falls into older anime. I've seen a bit of the new stuff. I have to watch a little bit more because right now I'm making my way through the original Gundam series. Like I just watched all of the original. Now I'm getting through Zeta. I'm trying to get ready to see Char's counterattack in December. Because originally, actually, my original career, I wanted to be a historian. I originally wanted to be a film historian. And I also got into anime at a younger age. And I started getting into more and more series thanks to the original Dragon Ball was sort of the thing that got me into all of it. And that is the series I know the most about. Everything. I have some of the weirdest Dragon Ball merchandise you can think of. I had to prove to people that GT Hong Kong Laserdiscs existed. That GT was even released on the format at all. If you look that up, you'll find my pages. Because nobody likes GT, but that's besides the point. But no, I haven't kept up too much with the new Yamato, but I hear about it a lot from the community and August Rigoni, who I talk to on occasion.
Mm-hmm.
He's a cool guy. I knew him because I'm really into Godzilla, and
Right.
I read his book and I found him. But sorry, I tend to.
Well, what's interesting about following the merchandising now is that the core audience for Yamato is still the original audience from the 70s and 80s.
Oh yeah.
And we're all now in our 40s and 50s. And so a lot of the merchandising that they're doing for the new stuff is aimed at us.
Model kits and all that.
Well, to a certain degree, but a lot of the stuff that they're putting out is like lifestyle products specifically to be used by adults.
Really?
Yeah. Like one of the things they did as a product tie-in for Yamato 2202 was an electric fan.
Okay.
In Yamato colors, and it was something that previously existed, and the company that made those did a Yamato version of it. And this is not a small disposable item. This costs a few $100s, but it's super cool and futuristic. They actually made it a prop in the show, so you got to see it, on screen at one
That's even
point.
better.
Yeah. And so they made this thing and they put it out, and I imagine they sold quite a few of them. But that's not the sort of project or product you aim at a teenage audience or even somebody in their 20s.
Mm-mm.
This is for a homeowner. And so it still demonstrates that they are evolving and hopefully creating the new business models for more anime to follow. Other than Yamato, I think Gundam is the only franchise that can do this because they have they have such a deep well of goodwill from their original audience, which is still young enough to be around.
They even made their own shows about, oh, here kids make Gunpla and you can see all the adults getting in on it too, and it's great.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, I've just started getting into the Gundam community. I cosplayed as Domonkashu from Mobile Fighter G Gundam for Youmacon this year, which was fun. I do want to try cosplaying a couple of Yamato characters. I wanted to be Dessler at one point, but that cape's going to be weird. I was Captain Harlock a couple of years ago because I'm also a huge fan. I'm just a fan of Matsumoto's universes in general. I've got a lot of fun merch from that, and it's weird to be in college and talk about this kind of stuff with a community who doesn't always care as much about it. It's harder to get a lot of friends I know to watch these kind of shows because they don't like the art style, or they don't like the pacing, or they want everything now. I definitely find it very interesting, but I'm going to definitely keep going with my Yamato passion and keep watching it. I do need to start the newer series. I said I was going to cut it final just to take a break and start other things, but I'll go back and watch the newer stuff eventually.
How about Resurrection?
I've seen a bit of Resurrection. I have it downloaded. I have to watch more of it. What I found really fascinating about it was I know you talked about it. I read one of your things was seeing the final Yamato footage on the big screen, which must have been a really crazy experience.
Yeah, it was like a direct echo of what it was like back in the day. And up until that point, I had never seen Yamato on a big screen. That was my very first theatrical experience with it. And it makes a difference. It makes a big difference when you're not seeing it on a TV screen that's smaller than you.
Oh yeah, that was sort of their marketing for the special edition re-release of Star Wars was, if you show it on a CRT and the screen this big, you haven't seen it at all.
That's right. That's right. And it's exactly the same with this. When it's sometimes being shown to you at 1-to-1 scale, a whole new world.
Yeah, I'd love to see, I guess, the Yamato from a perspective of it's larger than me and not just let me watch it on my television screen. I have a pretty decent sized TV. I watched most of it on. I mostly used to watch on my laptop before class. But I think my favorite was when my friend and I watched Be Forever Yamato. We watched their fan sub. We watched the Warp Dimension sequence. And it had a decent sized screen for it. My jaw was to the floor after the Warp Dimension sequence.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. I'm really glad that movie got a Blu-ray release because those early releases look really bad. Some of them, and they're matted. A couple.
They didn't really know how. Well, they really couldn't do it justice until we had widescreen, high definition TVs in our homes.
Mm-hmm.
Up to that point, every version of that came out was a compromise. But now you can see it unfold exactly the way it was in the theater, and it's beautiful.
I agree. It's incredible. I even like I'll never do it, but I find it cute that they let you they give you the option to mat it for the first half. Just for the hell of it. Well, I know why they did it, but at least it's not Final Yamato's Blu-ray, which drove me up a flipping wall. And I it was funny because I was reading your video releases on it before I watched Final. I think I was in the middle. Honestly, I think I was only like 10 episodes into series 1 because I read ahead. I didn't read any of the story details, so I didn't want it spoiled. I did find out that, well, I guess, since I may cut this part out, that Shima does die beforehand. But also, that was like one of the since I won't get a chance to talk about this with another Yamato fan. That detail kind of weirded me out when I saw it the first time when he says, "Oh, Yuki, it's you I always loved." I'm like, okay, what happened to tennis?
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, that was my chief complaint about Final Yamato. It seemed like they selectively forgot about things that should have been mentioned, that should have still had an impact on that story.
I agree.
Yeah. And
Uh,
so I think that for a lot of fans, it lost authenticity because of moments like that.
Yeah, I definitely think Final. It's sort of a fan service movie to me. It's a nice farewell, in a way, because it was at the time 'cause Yamato was already in decline, and there was the disaster that was Yamato 3. Um, I think it was a nice little way to end it. Personally, I would have been okay if Be Forever was the ending, but yeah, I mean, I know. I didn't even know that Farewell was supposed to be the ending. Speaking of Farewell, I got the PlayStation 1 game at Youmacon this year. It was the only Yamato game I ever managed to find in person. But I do want to get more of those. But yeah, I definitely see people's problems with Final. I love Final, but it's definitely not a perfect film. Um,
Yeah, the more I got into the making of it as a research project, the more I learned to appreciate it
oh yeah.
because I could see or I could understand more of the thinking behind the theme, and so that clarified it for me quite a bit, and made it much easier to forgive the stuff that I thought they should have done differently.
hmm I didn't. I had the experience of I read all the stuff beforehand when I watched it, so I had that understanding throughout the whole thing, and it was an emotional little thing. So it was it's hard to say goodbye to the Yamato like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, even with the cute little the funny death wails at the end. Uh, I don't know how a ship could scream like that, but my God, they did it. It's still a movie I would love to see with the original stereo. 'Cause that's such a terrible DVD. Oh my God. Um, which is part of my little project of getting that together. And as soon as I get that all done, I'll let you know. I would love to see if we could try to get a better transfer of the 35 millimeter cut of Final, which I found weird that it was slowed down or out of sync on my end. Uh,
Yeah, I investigated that after you mentioned it, and I was told that there was no way the audio could have slipped out of sync in the using the method of transfer that they used. So that must have been inherent with the original VHS, and I just never noticed it before.
Wow. Yeah, because I'm sitting there and I get to I go to one of my favorite scenes was when they reintroduce Okita and he slams his hand on the counter and I'm like, wait a minute, that slap comes like a couple seconds early, like too early.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's really weird. I was hoping to do like a supplemental thing where it's like, oh yeah, if we get this done, go and watch the 35 millimeter version. So I'll still sub it. Definitely want to do some digging. I might want to even try to get a copy into my own hands. Have you tried? Did you throw it into like a VCR recently and see if it did the same thing or?
I want to play that tape as little as possible.
I understand that. I definitely understand that. I saw one on a Japanese auction site for like $400, and I was like, yeah, nope. I'm a little broke for that, but I
Uh-huh.
want to definitely get my hands on it. I was working with some friends, working more on new Daikon restorations, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I got a beta rip of it." And we watched it. And I'm like, "This is horribly slowed down." Like, I mean, I already know that ELO's Twilight's pitch shifted in the original version because it's even on the Laserdisc. But oh my god, that beta tape is, I don't know if it was either the player or the tape itself, but it was weird.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, that was probably due to an old player.
yeah, film restoration's a hobby. I do on occasion. I'm part of different fan subbing groups and things like that. But by the way, I was thinking, so I just watched Aiko 2 again today. You did a couple Aiko comics.
Yeah, that's right. That came about in a very unusual way. Back in the early '90s, I was working for Malibu Comics, which is not around anymore, and they had an imprint called Eternity that was formed to do anime and manga style projects. And so I did a few things for them, like Lensman and Captain Harlock and Robotech. And at one point, they had landed the rights to do a Project Aiko comic. And a couple of years earlier, those rights existed in the hands of Antarctic Press. And so I tried out for that. I heard that they had it, and I knew Ben Dunn, the artist there and the owner, through various fan circles. So at one point, I did a little, like, 2 or 3 page tryout for him, and that project never went anywhere. But then a few years later, when I was at Malibu, it came up again. And so that's when I was able to actually get on it. And my role at that point was to lay out the adaptation for Ben Dunn to do the finished art. And so I was given the task of transforming it from anime to comics. And we went through that whole first film. And then in the wake of that, I left Malibu and I started a little company of my own with a couple of friends that we called Studio Go. And our purpose was to continue creating comics based on anime. And our first client was Central Park Media,
Aha, yes.
known as US Manga Corps. They were the ones who had all the rights for Aiko. So they hired us to do the next couple of Aiko projects. So that's how I was able to have a hand in 3 different Aiko comics over a number of years.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And
we also did MD Geist and Galforce and Armored Trooper Votoms.
I'm actually trying to get my hands on the Blu-rays to Armored Trooper Votum so I can actually start flipping watching it. I was thinking of either getting the Laserdisc box or the Blu-rays, but I was like, I've seen those Laserdisc boxes around. Again, my friend and I kind of share anime together, so we between the two of us, we have around 600 Laserdiscs all together, just here in Michigan.
That's great.
A lot of anime stuff, a lot of fun ones. We'll find stuff like they got the whole box set of El Gaim on a whim, so we just decided to watch it, and we both really like it. Like, we know it's garbage, but we really like it.
I still have a soft spot for El Gaim.
I agree, and I love this book. Like, this one is the art's actually from the show, but,
right?
Not actual scenes, but definitely they're more of an idea.
Yep. It's a much better match for the style of the show.
Oh yeah. But yeah.
Well, if you're still trying to pick up Votoms, I cannot recommend some of the Blu-rays because they have transfer problems.
I'm not surprised. A lot of these newer Blu-rays are like, I can list like a multitude of problems with the Gundam Blu-rays, like too much DNR, Zeta not having the original intros and outros. God, some of them are just really awful.
Mm-hmm. A few of the Votoms Blu-rays are perfectly good, but the ones for the TV series are very stuttery when it comes to camera movement. You know, like when an image pans, instead of a smooth motion, it'll be a stutter.
Oh, there's a word for there's a term for that. It's not motion blur. It's something else, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Laser discs it is.
it was an error. They set the wrong fielding or something,
Aye.
and nobody checked it before it was finalized, I guess. And so they put out a highly compromised product. I can't even watch it.
Aye.
Uh,
Yeah, well, thank you for telling me that, because now I'm not buying it.
but
I got
you may
laser
still
disc
be able
discs.
to find used DVDs with the same content, and they're going to look a lot better,
True.
ironically.
Would,
However, some of the newer Votum's OVAs are also available on Blu-ray, and they look fine.
yeah, I heard those were pretty decent. Honestly, the best transfers I've ever seen anime-wise, those Yamato Blu-rays, the original series, that looks incredible. Like,
Yeah,
it's jaw-dropping how good it looks.
you can count all of the cigarette ashes on every frame.
Oh, it's so great. Well, because I was originally watching it through just a streaming site, and it looked awful. It was super compressed. I think it was just a DVD transfer. And then I got my hands on the Blu-ray transfers. I'm like, wow, this is a difference. Um,
Yeah.
I think Yamato 3 was the worst way to watch it. It was horribly compressed. The subtitles were so insanely inaccurate. Like, oh boy, you think you were watching a pirated DVD. It was great.
Well, maybe it was because there were Hong Kong DVD bootlegs for every series, and they all had iffy subtitles on them.
Interesting. I think they were fan subs because I was reading about it. It was on a what site was it? Wasn't yeah, it was